Barranquilla and at Universidad del Norte here. And sometimes I do things in public schools or in other places around Barranquilla. I'm really excited to be with you today, and I'm really happy that you're here. So thank you so much for joining. As you know, we are going to talk about games in the language classroom. So let's go ahead and get started. And before we get started, I just want to say that at any time, if you have a question or a comment, I would love to hear from you. I will try my very best to address your questions and comments when I can. So I'll be doing my very best to pay attention to everything that you're saying. So yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first of all, I wanted to set the tone by asking some questions. And these are actually, except for the first three, all of them except for the last one are kind of rhetorical questions, meaning I just want you to sort of think about them for a moment, and hopefully we will address each of the questions throughout the webinar. I'm sure that you already know the answers to some of these questions or have your own ideas about some of them, but just wanted to get us started with some questions. So first of all, why should we or shouldn't we use games in the classroom? So some people think games are wonderful, other people not so much. So what are some reasons why we should, and what are some reasons why we shouldn't? And the second question is, how should we select appropriate learning games? So we're going to talk about that today. And then what are some games that could be helpful in the classroom? There are so many games in the world that we can use in our classroom. The tricky part is to adapt those games or to create our own games that are really going to help our students. And then, of course, finally, my last question is, what questions do you have about games? So is there any burning question out there that you really would like to know the answer to? Anything that you're really hoping to know before, or hoping to hear addressed before we begin? And I'll wait just a few seconds for any questions that you might have. Go ahead and write. You can write your questions in the chat box. Okay? No questions? All right, that's okay. We'll just keep going. But I do think it's good before you start a topic in your classroom to ask your students what questions they have about the topic. Maybe if you're doing a reading or something like that, you can ask them what questions they have. And as they go throughout the lesson, you can answer those questions and address those questions. All right, and this is another thing that I think is a good one to do in your classroom that you can try. It's the old agree, disagree. So here today on the webinar, you can write in the chat box agree or disagree, or if you happen to be in a viewing session, you can put your thumb up or your thumb down, and the person who's hosting the viewing session can give a general consensus of what the group has said, agree or disagree. So I'm going to read several sentences in just a minute, and I would love to hear from you whether you agree or disagree. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. The first one, do you agree or disagree? The classroom should be a serious and quiet place at all times so that students can learn the most possible. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? And of course, I was also wondering, when you were a student, do you think that your teachers agreed or disagreed with this statement? I think a lot of my teachers wanted the classroom to be, yes, agreed, that they wanted it to be serious and quiet all the time so that students could learn the most possible. All right? Next one, think about this one. Do you agree or disagree? Games should be used every day. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Okay. Next we have, if you're not sure what to do for your lesson, use a game. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with that statement? If you're not sure what to do for a lesson, just go ahead and play a game. All right. Next one. What do you think of this one? Children might feel nervous if they are asked to compete in a game, so you should not use games. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with this? Next one is competition is not appropriate for the classroom. Agree or disagree? Okay, and finally, competition is fun and can be used appropriately. Agree or disagree? What's your opinion of this one? It's probably pretty obvious what some of my opinions are based on the things that I wrote, right? But I definitely agree that competition can be fun in the classroom and can be used appropriately with games. All right, lots of agrees. Fantastic. Okay, so this is our objective for today. This is what we hope to accomplish. The objective is participants will understand how and why to use games and examine some examples of games that they might use in their classrooms. And of course, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear any questions or any extra information that you have found helpful about how and why to use games. And if we have time at the end, maybe you can share a couple of ideas about how you could use or adapt games for your classroom. All right? So I am going to suggest a few reasons for using games, but I was wondering if you could first respond in the chat box. I would love to hear maybe 1 or 2 reasons why do you think that maybe games are a good idea. Why do you think games are a good idea? Do you have any ideas that you can write in the chat box? Any reasons for why games are a good idea? Good, they motivate students. Very good. A couple of, I agree, definitely. They motivate students. Anything else? Okay, excellent. I'm going to get, oh, and yes, the students can relax and it helps them to feel comfortable. And definitely, they can motivate shy students. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your ideas. All right, so your ideas are probably similar to my ideas, so here we go. Definitely, it encourages participation when they all participate. Thank you. All right, so my first reason is that games are fun. And I'm supposed to have a smiley face right next to there, but I don't think it works out. So games are fun. They can help to lower the affective filter. So you know about the affective filter, right? It's that thing that we know about as language teachers that sometimes is sort of like an emotional block. that students put up to language learning. And the block may have to do with being afraid of taking a risk, or anxious or nervous about making a mistake, or it may even be that a student is very bored with what's going on in the classroom, and so her mind is not engaged. But a game can help to alleviate those feelings. Students might become so engaged in a game that they forget that they are afraid of making a language mistake. And hopefully, involvement in a game will engage them and help them to be less bored, if that's one of the reasons too. Okay? So that's my first reason. Games are fun, and they help students to have a lower affective filter. And definitely, playing is something very natural for humans. Thank you for sharing that. All right, my next reason is that games are motivating, which many of you have already said. So thank you for those ideas. They intrinsically pique interest as students learn through play. Many students feel motivated by healthy competition to do well in a language game when they may not be as interested in other language activities. And students also maybe will have a better overall perception of a class if you add some games. So if you're always doing really boring, mundane things in your classroom, they might not have a very good view of English because they're bored all the time in your English class. But if you add a few games here and there, they might have a better general perception of English. And even just that perception that English is fun and that the class is something that students enjoy doing can really help your students to learn more English. All right. Number 3. Games are challenging. So they can challenge students to be responsible for their learning in a new way. So games can challenge students in new ways in that a lot of times in the classroom, the challenges that students face are very teacher-student directed or are individually based. But games can give students a new context for language performance in front of their peers and in collaboration with their peers and in teams. So it's a new way to express themselves with the language. Okay, number 4. Games are interactive. They inherently create situations in which students interact with each other. So along the same lines as games are challenging, games are also interactive. So games create natural places for students to use the language with peers. And research continually shows that making social connections is vital for our students as they learn to communicate with each other. Or to learn anything. Anytime that you learn something and then can share that with another person, the connections and the strength of that learning is all the greater. All right, and finally, number 5, games are repetitive. So they help students to repeatedly practice in fun ways. So repetition and practice, as you know, are key to successful language learning. But as teachers, if we're not careful, repetition can quickly get boring, right? If we just have them repeat and doing the same thing all the time. But if we vary our activities and if we add some games, that can be a fun way to repeat and practice what we've learned. All right, and definitely, Veronica, they help students to use the language, and they can share their knowledge with their partners. Absolutely. Thank you for your ideas. Is there anything else that you would add to my list? Or anything that you thought of, or any comments or questions that you have so far? Okay, we're going to move on. Yeah, okay, no question. So yeah, repetition is good because it helps to develop a habit. Very good, thank you. All right, we're just going to talk about a couple of definitions of games. Here's one. A recent definition views games as a system in which players engage in artificial conflict defined by rules and resulting in a quantifiable outcome. So that's a nice, big, fancy definition of games. Basically that we make up a conflict. Maybe you don't really have a conflict, but you decide to create one with the game and has rules and all that kind of thing. And then the other definition is games are further often described as transmedial phenomena, implying that the same game can be transmitted through different kinds of media. So you can do a game in your classroom. You can do the same game, but maybe a different format. Could be online. You can do these games. Some of the games that I'm going to show later, you could even probably do at a party. So it's just that there are various ways that you can use the same game. Okay? And definitely they create a relaxed environment. Thank you for that comment. All right. And here are a couple of research findings about games. So we have the pluses and the minuses about games. So a plus or a positive thing about games is that they can enhance students' understanding of something. Another one is that students can gain linguistic and communicative knowledge. And another one is that students engage in rich social negotiations. So we talked about those a little bit in our reasons, but it's nice to know that there's a little bit of research out there to back it up. But there are some negatives to using games. So it's not just that games are always wonderful and fantastic. So in some studies, only 50% of students enjoyed playing games. And this is the most important. I think the second one is the most important. Sometimes students get tired over time if or when students find out that games do not match their assessment test. So this one is basically saying if you play games all the time in the class and it doesn't have something to do with like the test that the students will have to take or the assessments that they will have to do, if it has nothing to do with what they're really learning or the objectives in your class, then actually students can be discouraged by that and learning can decrease. So that's something definitely to keep in mind, is that we don't ever want to just play a game for playing a game's sake in the classroom necessarily. We want to make sure that it's focused and concentrated on the language objectives of the course and on what we're going to test the students on. And then sometimes the last one, games can serve as a distracting element instead of keeping students focused on a learning task. So for this last one about games being distracting, I definitely think that in many settings, using games in your classrooms requires very good classroom management. You want to make sure that your students are in the habit of really paying attention, of listening to instructions, so that your games don't turn out to be just kind of a chaotic place where people are just, going crazy. So we want to make sure that there's good classroom management involved. And absolutely, it definitely depends where the game is and how many students you have. And one game that works for someone might not work for you, or you might have to do some adapting for it. But definitely, yeah, not every game can be used in every context. Okay? But in general, I think that games can be really good, especially if you keep yourself focused on your language objectives and if you have good classroom management going on. And most of the time, games should be used as practice of what has already been taught. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's just a good teaching principle to apply, because usually a game requires students to practice something that they already know. So usually when we're using these games, and when I give you examples later on in the webinar of different games, the assumption is that you would have already covered these topics or these grammatical points in class, and then the games turn out to be practice for the students. Okay? So, continuing. All right, I'm going to give like a list of, I think it's another 6 sort of how-tos of how to use a game, and then we're going to look at a bunch of examples of games, and I'll have to rely on your participation a little bit. We're going to try to practice them over the World Wide Web. We'll see how it goes. And then hopefully that will help get your wheels turning, and you can use one of these games in your classrooms very soon. Okay? So I hope everybody's still doing okay out there, and we're going to keep going. So the first thing that, in answer to the question, how should we select appropriate learning games, is, like I've said several times before, choose your language objective. So you don't want to just go into your classroom at the last minute and say, I don't have a lesson plan. I don't know what to do. I think I'm just going to play the same game that we played last week. No. You want to make sure, exactly, Veronica, that they are a way of helping students to use the language in the course of the game. Absolutely. You want to make sure that there's a purpose involved, and that you're not just doing something because you forgot to make a lesson plan. Yeah? So definitely think of your language goal and objective first thing you do when you're implementing games. Number 2, you want to plan for assessment. So you need to consider how you will assess the student's mastery of the language material. So will it be on a future test, or in an essay, or speaking activity? And during the lesson or during the game, how will you be able to see whether students understand the topic? So you might want to think about possible outcomes and ways in which you might need to do some reteaching or a mini lesson before or after the game to review. So, for example, if your instructions are really clear for a game, but students seem to have a very difficult time playing the game, then maybe there's an element of language that you need to teach again, you know? So you just, as you're watching the game and as you're watching students interact in the game, you want to pay attention to how they're doing and think about what parts of this game are the most difficult for these students and why, right? So, and you can also, another thing with a game is you can also often tell who is the leader and who are the followers a little bit, right? So you can kind of see when a student performs well in a game that they are really grasping the language concept that you're working on, or you might be able to see that, you know, some of the students are a little bit lower, and then you might want to do some tailoring of your instruction for some individual students. Okay? Ready for number 3? Number 3, then, so after you've set your goal and you've planned for assessment, then you need to plan to use a game that will allow your students to meet that objective, okay? So pretty much just you need to decide on a game that you heard about, or make up your own game that's going to help your students reach the language goals, and that will be practice for them to do well on future assessments. And number 4, of course, you need to consider the materials and the time that you will need, just to make sure you're nice and organized before everything. And definitely, the teacher could start a conversation using vocabulary and grammar. And definitely, teachers should check the level of the game to fit their students' language level. Absolutely, very good. Thank you for those comments. Yeah, that's definitely a good one to add. I think I'm going to add that one to my next webinar. Make sure that the game matches your student's level. And then, of course, number 5, you are going to play the game with your students. That's the easiest one to explain, right? And number 6 is the time for reflection. I think reflection is a good idea to give your students at the end of a class. They can kind of regroup and think about what they learned, what they practiced, the mistakes that they made, the improvement that they made in the language from before. And then also you as a teacher should reflect. Think to yourself, what went well? What didn't go well? How can I modify this game to teach, to make it better for my next class? Or how could I use a similar game to teach a different grammar concept or vocabulary concept? So just make sure that you're really thinking about and considering what you do at the end and after the class. All right. So, do you have any questions about how or why we should use games, or would you add anything? I appreciate some of your additional comments about making sure that the level is appropriate. Anything else that you would add to my list? You can give some feedback activities, definitely. So kind of reinforce what you've already taught before you do the game. Okay, if there are no other thoughts on that, we're going to go ahead and look at a bunch of examples of games. All right? So, are you ready? Here we go. Here's our first one. Okay, the first one is the grammar board race. Okay, have you guys ever seen this grammar board race video on YouTube? You can look it up on YouTube later after this webinar. I am also going to post my PowerPoint presentation on my blog, and at the end of the webinar you can write down my blog address and you can go to this PowerPoint presentation and you can go to the link and see how the teacher does this game. Okay, good. Glad some of you have heard about it. Excellent. So here's our first game. The game is called the Grammar Board Race, and basically what happens is that the teacher writes, for this one, and you can adapt it for a lot of different grammar points, but in this one, the teacher is using this as a review for comparative forms of adjectives. For example, like clean changes to cleaner. For example, my friend's apartment is cleaner than my apartment, right? Or friendly changes to friendlier. You know, you have to change the Y to an I and add ER. Or expensive is changed to more expensive. So she's doing a review of the forms of comparative adjectives. So she writes a series of adjectives on the board, and the students race and take turns in teams to write the correct form on the board. And the group who finishes most quickly and correctly wins. So the students later write sentences with the words to provide more context and meaning to the activity. Okay, so does that make sense? And here is a little bit bigger of a picture, a little bit better. So, and like I said, you can Google this or YouTube search it, or you can go to my blog later. Okay? So basically, students have to write the correct form of the comparative adjective, and they just write one at a time, and then they tag each other. Okay? So what do you think about this game? If you see on the video later, when you're looking at it, you will see that the class in the example is a very small class. And so it's probably a little bit easier to use this with a smaller class that has students that have very good behavior. But I think you can do this. You don't necessarily have to do it on the board. You can also do it maybe in groups of 4 with a piece of paper at desks. And the first team to get all of the correct forms of the adjectives can be the winner of all of those groups or something like this. So like I said, I encourage you to look online at this video, and I definitely encourage you to adapt it for your context. Okay? Yeah, and it's definitely a competition activity, and it looks like fun to me too. All right, here's another game. So I should have said this before. This is game number 2, and I have a lot of them, so bear with me. But with any game, I do not think that it's necessarily going to work in every context, but I do think that there are elements of most games that you can change and modify and adapt for your context. So the idea of these games is to get your wheels turning and for you to start to think, okay, I have 40 students in my classroom. How could I do a similar game in my classroom? Okay? And so definitely there are going to be problems with any, possible issues with any game. The idea is to think about how can I use a good idea and modify it for my context. That's the best way that I know to use ideas that I get from different workshops or classes or whatever. Okay, so enough about that. Now let's talk about number 2, the memory game. Okay? In the memory game, you can see the instructions here. So one student says a sentence, and then the students say the same sentence and then add something. And once someone forgets what was said or cannot add something, he or she is out of the game. So here's the example. You can see right here on the slide. Student 1 says, I went shopping. Student 2 says, I went shopping and bought a jacket. Student 3 says, I went shopping and bought a jacket and a cap. And of course, exactly, it can help students to memorize new words. It helps students to really pay attention and listen. And it helps students to use whatever vocabulary they can think of to expand on sentences. And that's great that you use that in Spanish with your kids too, Veronica. That's a wonderful thing. So hopefully this game makes sense. Maybe your students would be standing in a circle, and they would have to go around and around until someone forgot what was said before him or her, or someone couldn't think of anything more to add, then they would have to be out. So I'm counting on you. Let's try to play this one. So let's try to play this in the chat box and see how it goes. Since we are not physically together, it's a little bit tricky. But I'm going to try to give you about 30 seconds or maybe 1 minute. And because we are not like in a circle physically together, I'm going to ask you to try to make the longest possible sentence. And we're going to see who on the webinar chat box or maybe a viewing session group or whichever one can make the very longest sentence. So I want you to add to this sentence here. Yesterday, I went to the park. So use that sentence as your starting place and add as many verbs or nouns to the sentence as possible. So remember the example? I went shopping and bought a jacket and a cap. Now we're going to do the same thing with this sentence. Yesterday I went to the park and, very good, I see one. Yesterday I went to the park and I took many photographs. Excellent. Another one. Yesterday I went to the park and, what else? Try to make a nice long sentence. I'm going to give you about 20 more seconds. Good one. Yesterday I went to the park and ate a huge and colorful ice cream. Absolutely. Or ice cream cone. Fantastic. Yesterday I went to the park and played with my cousin. Fantastic. Want any more? Okay, let's see. I think Let's see. I can't really tell who the winner is. I think Gabriela Gallardo de Dolorier, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing. I think that's our winner. I think that's the person who had the longest sentence. I am so sorry if I am incorrect. Okay, or if I'm making out. Another good one. Yesterday I went to the park and I met new friends. Fantastic. Okay, excellent job, everybody. So you can see how that works. And I think I saw another question in the chat box a few minutes ago. Something like, should we use games because there's an objective or because it interests the students? And I think both of those reasons. We should use games to motivate students because it's interesting, and we should use games in a way that helps our students to meet the language objectives of the classroom. So I think we can't leave either one of those out. Okay, people. Way to go, Gabriela. All right, here we go. Next one. This game is called word association. So this is when students basically brainstorm a list. So for example, the topic could be the classroom, and students have to maybe work in teams to make the biggest list of vocabulary words that are associated with the classroom as they possibly can. Or another way to do it is you, again, maybe are in a circle and you say the topic, the classroom, and then you have to go around the classroom and each student has to think of a new vocabulary word associated with the classroom. And the first person who cannot think of any vocabulary words for the classroom is out, something like this. So this topic is the classroom, and this first student says chalk, then book bag, tape recorder, and finally the fourth student says ruler. Okay, so that's an example. So let's try to play it, and I would like to hear your ideas in the chat box. So I want you to write as many vocabulary words in the chat box as you can related to my neighborhood. So you can write a big long list if you want, or you can write one word and wait for your friends, your fellow webinar viewees to write some other words, whatever you want. So maybe let's have people write a few words that they can think of that are associated with the topic, my neighborhood. I know you know some vocabulary words about my neighborhood. For example, the park, the grocery store, what else? Pollution. Yep, true. Definitely true. Another one, that's a deep one, JML, but it's very true. House, good. Sidewalks. JML Colombia is doing a great job. Pets. Anybody else? I'm going to give 10 seconds, otherwise JML Colombia is the winner. Park. School. Okay. Oh my gosh, Invitado 390. I think you're actually the winner. You came from behind. Very good. Neighbors, park, house, friends, traffic, pollution, union, love, kids, trees. House, friends, traffic, pollution. Okay, fantastic. So I think actually it looked like JML Colombia was going to be the winner, but it looks like Invitado 390 is the winner. So way to go, Invitado 390. Good job. Okay, some cats too. Very good. All right. So, good job. Let's go to the next game. Are you ready? You feeling the competition across the internet wave? All right, next game. Let's see. Okay, the next one is probably one that you have used before. It's very common in language classrooms, and that is miming, or sometimes people like to call it charades. So students mime an action, and other students perhaps guess what the action is. So you might do it on a topic. You might have a bunch of vocabulary words related to one topic, like jobs or occupations, famous people, animals, sports or sports players, characters from a book, movie, story, or article that was read in class. Oh, way to go, Invitado 390. Way to go, Joseph, for being the winner of our last game. Very good. But for miming, or you can do like a combination of many topics that you have covered. Maybe you've covered food, clothing, occupations, weather, and leisure activities. And so you decide at the end of learning all of those different topics that you're going to do a miming game where students have to guess what the action is. Okay? So unfortunately, well, I guess you could see me if I wanted to, but I'm going to just show a picture instead because we do not have a big group. We cannot see each other to practice this game together. Yeah, actually that's true. Sometimes the bad thing about miming is that kids yell the answers in their native language. So those types of things are things that you definitely need to establish before you begin a game. Is to say something like, you must call out the answer in English, otherwise your team loses a point. You know, something like that. You need to establish, definitely for any game, according to your context, you want to establish the rules and the guidelines to make sure that students are, you know, really getting the most out of the language use. Okay? And yeah, this is definitely very tied to culture based on what job or occupation you're doing, or famous people. So tailor it for the culture of your students, something that's going to be appropriate for them. So I'm going to show you an action, and then you need to tell me in the chat box, what is this person doing? Can you see her moving? What is she doing? In this case, I am going to, I'm asking you about an action. What is she doing? What is the girl doing in this picture? Dancing while sweeping the floor. Way to go. Gabriela Gallardo de Dolorier is the winner again. Veronica was a close second. Listening to music, dancing, cleaning. Yes, she's doing several things at the same time. This action shot is something I got off of a website called Tumblr. You know about that website? T-U-M, Tumblr, like that. I just wrote it in the chat box. And you can look for these kinds of things, and if you have technology that you can use in your class, maybe this is something you can show to your students as well. Good, she is feeling the music, and she's doing this to relax while she is cleaning. Fantastic. So in this case, with this picture of the miming, you know, you can do miming of an occupation, for example, and just say, okay, she is the housekeeper, you know, or just the student has to shout out housekeeper, something like this. Or you can do it to promote some grammar practice. For example, you can tell your students, okay, you must give me a sentence that is in the present continuous or the present progressive to tell me what she is doing. Okay? So, yeah, I think it's funny too. I like this one. All right. Next, we're going to do the next one. I know I'm making many people sad not to watch this GIF anymore, but we're going to keep it going. Good. She is relaxing and doing the housework. I think that's the best way to clean. All right, continuing. Okay, here's another game. It's called the suggestion chain. And in the suggestion chain, this is a way to review leisure activities and ways to make suggestions. So, for example, the student 1 says, so it's like a group of 4 students for this example. So the first student says, let's go to the concert. And the second student says, no, not the concert. What about going to the cinema? And the third student says, we could go to the dance club. And the fourth student says, no, not the dance club. Why don't we eat at a restaurant? So the students continue the game until they have used all of their leisure activities or until the students cannot think of anything else to do. Okay? So basically, this is another way to practice grammar because and sentence structure, because you're using things like let's go, or why don't we, or how about, or why not, or how do you feel about, or it would be nice to. So, and then, but you're just perpetuating those suggestions, so it's just a way to practice that type of conversation. Okay, so let's quickly practice this one. I would love to hear your suggestions. Unfortunately, we cannot all go to someone's house together as friends to watch a movie, but my suggestion is let's watch a movie at home. So in the chat box, you can write another suggestion that your students would also be writing or saying suggestions in this game. So you can start your suggestions with something like, why don't we, or let's go, or good, why don't we sing karaoke? Very good, Indicado 567. Why don't we sing at a karaoke club? Let's go, no, not a movie, let's go eat ice cream. Very good, JML. No, I do not like to watch movies. Why don't we go to play soccer? Very good. Let's go shopping instead. Great. Any more suggestions? We'd better stay home. It's cold outside. Nice. So you're agreeing with the suggestion. Go ahead and stay home, watch the movie. Oh, and JML Columbia is continuing with the chain, saying, I don't like soccer. How about getting ready to catch the bus? Fantastic. Good job, everybody. Good suggestions. No, I prefer to stay at home. Okay. Yeah, getting ready to catch. Good, 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 good. So everybody is doing a great job on these games. In this one, there's not as much of a winner. It's more of a chain to continue. I suppose if a student could think of nothing else, then they would have to be out of the game. Okay? Why don't we cook together? Great idea. Okay, good suggestions. Way to go, everybody. I really, really appreciate your participation today. It's making my life much more fun, and I hope it's making yours a little more fun as well. All right, let's look at a few more games. I swim like a stone. What about going to the theater? Fantastic. Okay, next one is expanding sentences with adjectives. So this is a game to help students practice their use of adjectives, to elaborate, to create more detail in their writing or their speaking. So let's go. So this one is, for example, the teacher would say or write on the board, she bought a jacket. Then the next student would say, she bought a black jacket. Then the next student, she bought a long sleeve black jacket. Then the next one, she bought a long sleeve black wool jacket. Okay, so you got it? Exactly. It's all about adjectives with this one. So you have to add adjectives, okay? So let's try playing this one real quick. All right, here's my sentence. I have a brother. So try to be nice to my brother with your adjectives. But if you're not, that's okay. You can have a little fun as well if you want. I have a brother. How can you add some adjectives to make this sentence nice and long? Any attempts out there? Oh, and also a very good idea, yes, for the order of adjectives. Any sentences for us on to expand I have a brother with adjectives? Good. I have a 20-year-old younger brother. Fantastic. I have a 17-year-old brother. Good. I have a younger brother. A twin brother. Good. And we could add lots of adjectives. For example, I have a tall, intelligent, crazy, fun-loving, serious, interesting 30-year-old brother. I have a 20-year-old brother with long curly brown hair. I have a tall, handsome, helpful, honest, playful, funny brother. I like it. Very nice. Good. So as you can see, students can really make big, long sentences with this, and the students can go in sequence, or maybe in groups. They can try to write the longest sentence possible with a certain amount of time. For example, you could give students 30 seconds or 1 minute to make the longest sentence, and then you could post their sentences around the room, something like that. That'd be a lot of fun. I have a 20-year-old skateboarding lover, younger brother with long curly brown hair. I have a wonderful brother. Good one. I have a funny, crazy brother. Another good one. Excellent thoughts out there, guys. Way to go. All right. Here is one of my favorite. Have you guys heard of this one before? It's called Fruit Basket Upset. It is really fun, but you have to be careful that nobody gets hurt. But mainly, I've never really had anyone. I've had a couple students fall playing this game, I have to be honest with you, but mainly people are okay. All right, bye Veronica, thanks for joining us. Okay, so with Fruit Basket Upset, this game, it can be used with many variations, but the idea is that everyone sits in a chair and in a circle, like you can see in the picture, and there is one fewer chair than there are people. I don't think it's too dangerous. You just have to be careful. That's it. People are running around. You have to be very, make sure that students are respectful of each other. It might not be the best to use this with very young students, and if there are 40 in the class. So everyone sits in a chair, and there is one fewer chair than there are people. One person stands in the middle, and you assign each student in a chair a fruit. So you might, if you have 20 students, you might choose 4 different fruits. For example, apple, orange, mango, pineapple, and grapes, or something like that. And the person in the middle says one of those fruits. For example, apple or apples. And then everybody who is an apple in the group has to stand up and run to a different chair. Okay? And the last person who doesn't find a chair is the one in the middle, and then that person has to call out a different fruit. And so that's how you do it. And so the students cannot go to the seat right next to them. They have to go to like a seat across the aisle from them. And you can also cry, the person in the middle can also say, fruit basket upset. And that means everybody has to stand and run and try to find a new chair. I really like this game. You can do this with any topic. It doesn't have to be fruit. You could do it with vegetables. You could do it with occupations. You can do it with clothing. Any vocabulary topic, you can say, okay, you are a chair, you are a table, you are a sofa, you are a TV, something like this. You can do it with anything, and then the students have to go up. Or another variation is to do the have you ever game. So it's same game, but the person in the middle says, have you ever been to Bogota, for example? And everybody who has been to Bogota has to stand up and run around and find a new chair? Or have you ever listened to Shakira? I know I'm using Colombian examples, but. And then everybody who's listened to Shakira has to stand up and run around and that sort of thing. Okay? So this is one that we are not going to be able to play over the World Wide Web, but I hope that you can understand the basic idea. Yeah? Okay. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I have many more slides. So I am going to skip a few of them. I'm just going to sort of say the name of a bunch of these games, and then I'm going to show you where you can download some free game materials. Yeah, it can definitely, invitado 800. It can be a chaotic game. You're absolutely right. So, like I said, you have to make sure that your students are mature and respectful enough to play this game. I have had a lot of fun playing this game with high school students, to be honest. And big groups and small. And generally, people are fairly respectful. And if they are not, usually we end the game. But, yeah. So I've really enjoyed playing this one. All right. So I am going to breeze through a bunch of things, a bunch of slides, and then talk about some websites. All right. So there's the Who Am I game, where students have to ask yes/no questions about who they are. I would love to explain that for a longer amount of time. There's the Sentence Scramble, where the teacher puts words into envelopes and students have to quickly write sentences with them. There's the Jeopardy game. This is a famous game in the United States that you can use to review concepts before a test. There is Swap the Word, which is super easy. You just write words on the board and have students come to the front. You can call the word out and the student just has to hit the word. Very easy. Scavenger Hunt, Taboo, Pictionary. Okay, and then here are a few more websites for where you can find more games. In my opinion, one of the best places is to go to the americanenglish.state.gov website, and in that, where you can see that circle right there, you just click, you just write games, and then you can find many things to download. These are all different games to download. You can print these off and use them with your students, or you can even just, if you don't have a printer, you can use the ideas here and make your own games. So go to americanenglish.state.gov and you can download lots of free games. These are all free. These are all of the game boards here. These are all of the game boards, and then also on that website they have instructions. And I'm only showing you 5 games here, but I feel like there are 10 or 15 games that you can use with your students that are on that website. And they're excellent. They have instructions, they have examples, and yes, at the end of the website webinar, I'm going to show you my blog, and you can write it down and get the links there. This is another good website, ESL Fun Games Online, and it's just, as you can see from the top, at the top of the slide, it says eslgamesworld.com. This is another one. I know I'm going too quickly, so you'll have to take a look on my blog. eslcafe.com, and if you go to Stuff for Teachers and the Idea Cookbook, there are many ideas there. And you have TEFLgames.com. Okay. So here's our quick recap. Basically, games can be good if used appropriately. Hello, everyone. You should align your games to learning objectives and assessment. There are many great games out there, and you should just adapt them and use them to your context. And be creative. Create your own games and share them with other people so that other people can use your ideas in their classroom. So here is my email address. My name is Katie Bain. There's my email address, and there's my blog. I am going to put this PowerPoint presentation on my blog, and so it will have all of the website links for you and all of those resources, and you can use my PowerPoint however you would like to. If you prefer to email me, I would be happy to hear from you. I would love that, so you can feel free to email me and say, can you please send me the presentation, and I will email you right back as soon as I can. And that's about it. Invitado 576, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody. Your participation made this webinar so much fun for me. I really appreciate it. And don't forget to go to the RELO Andes website too to keep up to date for future webinars and other opportunities for how you can improve your English teaching and your English learning. And yeah, like I said, I would love to hear from you. So please write to me. And yes, thank you so much. It was wonderful to meet you all as well. All right, thank you. Have a good day.